Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Spinner's Swap. It's so lovely to have you all once again in our little environment here. And of course, we want to start, thanking for Liz and Marnie for all the technical work that they do and for the coming and being so prompt and everything and getting us set up. So it's lovely to see you. I hope you're enjoying the coming of spring and the lovely flowers and everything that's happening outside. But now let's go inside to our wonderful storytellers and our co-host, Liz Nichols.
Thanks, Sally. Before we get into our storytellers, I want to make sure everybody sees Marnie. She's waving, and her name says tech host after it, and she is our fearless tech host. So if you're having any issues, if you could open the chat and send her a message. And speaking of the chat, if you attend other storytelling events, you may have experienced that a lot of people like to send messages to the storytellers in the chat because we are all going to be muted, and we can clap like this is a good way, or there are reaction buttons. If you know how to use those, you can use those. But if you like to put comments in the chat, please do. If you find that it's distracting you from listening to the storytellers to look at the chat, just close the chat so we all can control that. Same thing with your view. You could be looking at all of us, or Marnie, you're going to spotlight each storyteller as I introduce them, correct?
I will spotlight each storyteller, correct.
Great. So you can choose speaker view and really see the teller as they're telling. Okay. So what we're going to have a opening storyteller, and then our featured storyteller, and then a whole wonderful slate of storytellers after, with a short break, maybe 3 minutes, right somewhere in the middle, for a bio break, as some people call it. But feel free to take your own bio break whenever you need it. But that's the plan. And then at the end, also I just need to say that this is being recorded. And it will go up on, and we want to thank the Storytelling Association of California for this Zoom hosting, and that this will go on the SAC YouTube channel. So if you don't want to be part of the recording, please turn off your video. And it's lovely for all of us as when we're telling stories on Zoom to see some people's faces. So I hope some of you will keep your cameras on, and then we feel like it's more like we're in the room together. But we understand if you turn your camera off or you have something else you need to be doing, all of that. Okay, so without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our first storyteller is Andre Wilson, and I want to start by thanking Andre for being our representative to the SAC genre monthly storytelling event last night, and quite a few of you were there, and it was a really special evening, and I hope that lots of you will come next month. It's always the Wednesday. It's often just a day before our swap. Sometimes it's a week and a day. It varies. But Andre, please tell us another story.
Okay, Liz. Well, thank you very much for your gracious introduction. I thank you also for selecting me to represent the Contra Costa tail spinners. Well, I have a true turkey story to tell you. Now, we always see all these wild turkeys around every place in the Bay Area, every place in the country. Well, I work up in the Oakland Hills on Lincoln Avenue, just below the Mormon Temple and the Greek Orthodox Temple. And there's all these small, tiny corridors of open spaces through which flocks of turkeys come down. And sometimes they come down to the big field behind my nonprofit where I work at, so they can just go pick out worms or whatever that turkeys do. So one day I had to go get the big giant passenger van to go to a vending machine to stock the vending machine. So I had to go out to the warehouse to get the van, but the battery was dead. So I had to go about getting the jumper cables and hooking up with another vehicle. And I got the vehicle charged and ready to go. When we pulled out of the warehouse, my colleague and I, we pulled out of the warehouse and said, my God, we're so late now because we've been trying to get this van charged, you know? So we started to pull out of the garage when lo and behold, here comes a flock of wild turkeys coming onto the property. Must have been about 20 or so. And they were heading right towards us. I was thinking, like, oh my God, how am I going to get this big van around these turkeys here? You know, we're late. We don't have like one of those like railroad turkey crossings, you know, it's just you wait for the turkeys to cross, like, you know, that comes down like ding, 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 ding. You know, you don't have that. And I don't feel like waiting for the turkeys. And so I started to advance anyhow, and I started to honk my horn like, and the turkeys went almost all of them sort of scattered to the side, except for one turkey that basically stood right in front of this big passenger vehicle, and the turkey wouldn't budge. So finally I kept on honking again, and finally the turkey went to the side of the vehicle, and then, I kid you not, the turkey started to attack this giant passenger van. It would go up and boom, boom, strike its beak against the wheel, because that was the part that I saw move with this big wheel rotating. And I said, I can't believe this. I'm in this big vehicle here. I could run you over flat, and you are attacking the vehicle here, you know? And the turkey kept on attacking it, you know? And as I started to inch way out the parking lot, the turkey kept on running up to keep up with me, because I got the turkey really mad, you know? Like, never mess with the turkey. And I started to, I wanted to take my fist outside the window and say, get out of the way, get out of the way. But I was too afraid that the turkey was going to bite my hand. So I kept my fist inside. So there I was in the parking lot, honking my horn and yelling at the turkey, get out of the way, get out of the way, you know? And the turkey kept following me. It kept following me. I was in this big vehicle, and this turkey kept on following me. And it kept attacking the wheel with its beak, you know, because that's the part that I saw moving. And I started yelling at the turkey and like, get out of the way, get out of the way. And my colleagues, they opened up the windows, and he looked out the windows, and he saw this turkey chasing me across the parking lot. And I was yelling at this turkey. And finally, the turkey moved aside just enough so that I could speed up. Like, I'll go like 20 miles an hour in a 10-mile zone to get past the turkey. And I looked at my rear view mirror, and the turkey was still chasing me, trying to catch up. I got to get out of here. So I drove off and went to my destination to stock the vending machine. And when I came back, I did not see the turkey in the parking lot. I just parked the vehicle, and I had to go to a staff meeting that was held in the dining room. So we're having this meeting in the dining room, when lo and behold, out of the corner of our eye, we saw a turkey going around the back of the building. And it was going onto the patio, and somebody said, don't our patio door, are those automatic doors that open and close when the electronic eye sees something in front of it? I said, yes, those are automatic doors. So my colleague, Mar, ran and locked the back door to stop the turkey from getting inside. And my colleague, who was in the van with me, said, Andre, I think that turkey is still after you. So I have this turkey. He's really mad at me right now, and I hope I never encounter this turkey again. But I always keep my eye out when I go to work and I look around to see if I'm being followed or pursued by any feathered fiend. So that's my choose turkey story. It happened a couple of weeks ago, but I've never seen anything like that. Being attacked, chased, pursued by a turkey that remembered me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andre. And I love the sound of that turkey. You really
It
get.
was a bad turkey. They can get mad at they can hold a grudge. They can't hold a grudge. They can come after you. They remember you.
So we all better watch out.
Yes.
Thank you. That was
Thank
great.
you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for starting us out with such a great story. All right. I'm going to introduce our featured teller now, and then while I will also post in the chat, I meant to do that before, the order of our storytellers, just so everybody who's looking at chat can see that. And I am just thrilled that Ruth Halpern said yes to coming back as our featured storyteller. I don't know how many times you have been our featured teller before, Ruth, but Ruth is so well known to many of us, but maybe not all of you. And I feel like Ruth has been part of our storytelling scene here in the Bay Area as long as I've been a storyteller. From the stage at the Bay Area Storytelling Festival to just every kind of venue. She and I have worked together at Stage Bridge doing the Story Bridge program in classrooms. She does a lot of classroom residencies. She does assemblies in schools. She does improv and involved in youth programming beyond storytelling. We've seen, some of us have seen her become a mother, and now, gosh, she told me that she was on a college trip with her daughter, who some of us remember as very little. So I don't know where all the time went, but what I do know is that with all this experience, Ruth still stays so fresh and young and energetic. And so please welcome Ruth Halpern.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And Andre, I will tell a very mini version of the attack bird that has been plaguing us all spring, but my attack bird weighs about 4 ounces and is this big. And it's a house sparrow that has decided that our dining room window is its enemy. And every day from sunrise to sunset, it hurls itself against the window. It has bloodied itself in its effort to attack the evil sparrow in our house, which of course is it. So the turkey sounds much scarier. It could actually take you. I'm sorry to have to say that, but just be very careful. Well, I am so excited to be here. I think this is my 5th time telling stories at the swap, but I may have lost count. And I was trying to choose a story that would take us on a journey that might in some way parallel or resonate with the journey we've all been on now for 13 months. And I thought, who better to keep us going night after night through the long darkness than Scheherazade? So there was once, so I'm told, a great scholar by the name of Daniel, a man of the book, a man of the word. He owned a library of thousands of volumes, and his fame for his wisdom and his insight grew so great that the king sent for him and said, I need this man to be my advisor, my healer of spirit and body. You must come. And Daniel and his pregnant wife took ship with his thousands of volumes and were sailing across the Mediterranean when they were beset by pirates who captured the couple, took Daniel's books and hurled them overboard. He could only cling to 5 flimsy pages out of all of his books. And then when he wept and moaned and brought down lightning storms and seemed like nothing but bad luck, the pirates said, yeah, there's no treasure here. And they set him and his wife down in a strange land. And Daniel, as his wife's labor was beginning, grew faint. And he realized that he was not going to live to see his child. So he took those 5 worn pages and he tucked them into a wooden box. And he gave them to his wife and said, this is the only legacy I have to leave our child. When that child is old enough to understand the gift, here it is. And then he died. And it was only then that his son, Hasib, was born. Hasib was named in honor of his father and of the wish for wisdom. But as that little boy grew alone with his mother in a strange land, she sent him to school where he did not want to read. So she sent him to a trade to learn how to make shoes where he did not want to learn to cut leather. And so she put him to work at the chair maker's factory, and he did not want to carve the long wooden poles. There was no learning for Hasib. He would not have it. What he wanted to do was lie around the house and play the equivalent of video games with small stones that you toss and gamble with. Now his mother was desperate. She thought, we have to bring this boy up right. What he needs is a wife. We'll marry him off, and his new sense of responsibility will cause him to have initiative and go out into the world. But now he had 2 women to cook for him, and he lay about as much as ever. Until at last, a group of woodcutters who was walking by the door said, oh, we'll take Hasib with us. We'll bring him into the forest. He can cut wood with us and he'll get to keep his share. All he needs is a donkey. His mother bought him a donkey. And off he went with the woodcutters, and suddenly he had camaraderie. He had a purpose every day. He got up with his axe on his shoulder and out he went. And it was a new world, full of color and smells and life. And one day a rainstorm came sweeping down on the forest so fast the sky turned black, and all the woodcutters led their donkeys to the mouth of a cave, and they went inside. And most of them sat out at the entrance to the cave where they could throw their rocks and gamble. But Hasib went in further, where it was dark and there was a powdery dust all over the ground. And he sat by himself on a rock, and with the heel of his axe, he was just sort of tapping away at the floor of the cave when it changed its sound, and he heard a hollow resonance, and he scraped away the dirt with his hands, and there in the floor of the cave, inset into the stone, was a brass ring. He called his friends, come see, what is this? And all of his friends gathered around, and together they lifted up the lid. And it was in fact a trap door that led down into a cistern. And when one of them lit a match and they looked down in, it was a gleaming pool of fresh honey stored here like a gift of pure gold. And the woodcutter said, we'll share it, we'll take it, we'll sell it, and we'll all be rich. And Hasib, you can be the one who guards it. So they gave him a bucket, and it was Hasib's job to scoop bucketfuls up, and the woodcutters, as soon as the rainstorm ended, began carrying it into the market day after day after day, and it went for a good price. Until finally they had scooped out the entire cistern, and there were just little sticky oozes on the walls. But they decided to get the last of it while they could, and the woodcutters, they gathered by themselves, and then they said, Hasib, you go down in and scoop up the last of it. And they lifted up the lid for him, and Hasib leaned over to take a look, and wham, they pushed him down in and slammed the lid. And off they went with their donkeys and their buckets of honey, passed by Hasib's mother's house and told her how terribly sorry they were, but Hasib would not be coming home. During the rainstorm, his donkey had bolted, it had run off, and Hasib ran after it, and the 2 of them were taken by wolves, and it was a terrible tragedy. And then on they went to the market. leaving Hasib in darkness, alone as each of us has been during this quarantine. Hasib licked the last bits of honey off the wall. He sang to himself. He waited. He could not believe these people, his friends, had done this to him. That was what ate at his heart, like the sting of a scorpion. And then he felt a strange tickling on the back of his hand, and with one of his last remaining matches, it was a scorpion in this sealed black cistern. If a scorpion could get in, maybe he could get out. He set it up on the wall and he watched as it scrambled into one dark corner of the cistern and disappeared. And so he took out his knife and he began scraping at that little tiny hole the scorpion had gone through until he had opened a gap between the stones just big enough for him to slither through. And he made his way along a dark, rough, rocky passage, winding deep under the earth, going downhill, until at last that passage ended at a black wall with a door made of iron that had a lock of silver. And in that lock was a key of gold. And Hasib turned the key, swung open the door, and he found himself in a great cavern so big he couldn't see the limits of it. It seemed to be full of a shimmering silver lake, ripples and movements and smooth, soft, silky sounds of water moving. And at one end of the cave, he saw a great golden throne. In front of it were golden stools, more golden stools than he had ever seen. There were more than 12,000. Hasib wanted shelter in case this water should rise. So he ran and jumped up into the throne, curled up in the corner, and in exhaustion, he fell asleep. It was some time later when he woke up and he realized what had woken him was the of that cavernous lake seemed to be getting louder. And then a glow filled the room, and in that glowing light, he saw that what he had taken for silvery water was a carpet of serpents. The entire cavern was covered with the bodies, the twining, silvery, shimmering bodies of snakes. And then through that throng came a great, huge serpent as big as his own donkey, and carrying on its head a golden platter. And on the platter rode another serpent, an elegant, crystalline serpent with the face of a woman. And she was carried up to the foot of the throne. And all the serpents muttered menacingly at Hasib to get off the serpent's throne, get off the queen's throne. The queen of serpents had arrived, but she hushed them all. Without using her hands, she hushed them all and welcomed Hasib graciously. She said, "You must be hungry. It's safe here. We know that you are a child of men, and we will feed you." And she beckoned with her tail, and one serpent after another came forward with plates and bowls of every fruit that grows on trees and every berry that grows on bushes. And these were put in front of Hasib, and he ate, and he drank their fresh water until he was completely satiated. And that was when the queen said, "Tell us your story." And so Hasib told the story that I've told you, all about his beginnings and his friends who had led him to this place. And when he was done, he looked shyly at the Queen of Serpents and said, "Now, will you tell me your story?" And the Queen of Serpents began a story that led to another story, worse than any Netflix binge you've ever been exposed to. Her stories within stories within stories led all the way to the dark shadows underneath Scheherazad's bed. where the Queen of Serpents had listened as Scheherazade told the stories to save her own life. And when Scheherazade's well ran dry, it was the Queen of Serpents who whispered the next twist. Hasib listened to these stories and was transported. He felt himself back above the earth, living among the children of men, as she called them. And it made his heart ache. He said, please, please, I could live with you forever if only I could just see my mother one more time. And the Queen of Serpents said, oh, no, that cannot be. That must not be. For I know that if you were to go back to the land of the children of men, you would not be able to resist the pleasure of hanging out with your friends, stretched out in the warm, steaming waters of the public baths. And if you were to go to the public baths, to the hammam, surely there you would betray me. No, no, I would never betray you. I would never do anything. I love you. I love your stories. I promise, I swear on everything that I value, I will never go to the hammam, not in my entire life. I will stay pure. I just long to see my mother and my home. And the Queen of Serpents knew better. If you go, it will mean the end of me. But if you stay, it will mean the end of you. So you must go. Promise me. And Hasib said, I promise. And then he followed one of the serpents who led him up and out through the winding paths and caverns and passages and a place where he had to wiggle on his belly and out to the mouth of the very cave where he had been a prisoner. And he ran down the hillside straight back to his mother's door, knocked on that door, and she threw herself into his arms. She celebrated so wildly and loudly that the entire village knew that Hasib had returned. And the woodcutters knew that Hasib, who they had left for dead, was back. What do we do? What do we do? What do we say? Do we tell him? Do we ask him? What? And finally, they agreed among themselves that since they were the ones who had profited from his suffering, each of them would give them half of everything they had owned. And so now Hasib was reunited with his family. He was a rich man. He had nothing to do but celebrate with this friend and that friend and the other friend and the one who lived in the center of town right next door to the hammam. And it was the owner of the hammam who beseeched him, Hasib, you must honor me, you must come. I guarantee the cleanest water, the finest hot springs. Come, come, please do not shame me by rejecting my offer. And Hasib could not say no. He stepped into the beautiful tiled archway. He smelled the heat of the reeds. He dipped his toe in the water and he melted into the water. And it felt fantastic until he stood up. And the minute he stood up, two guards grabbed him by the arms and said, you're coming with us. You bear the mark and we are taking you to save the king's life. Hasib said, bear the mark? What do you mean bear the mark? I'm just... And he looked down, and there on his chest was a mark that had never showed until he stepped into the warm water of the Hasib, of the hammam. And it was the mark of a serpent. They said, you must take us to the Queen of Serpents, because it is only from her body that the medicine can be made that will save our king's life. And it did not matter how Hasib protested. It did not matter that he denied ever having met such a person, creature, thing. He was fated to lead the soldiers down the winding pathways into the cavern, where they seized the Queen of Serpents and they threw her into an iron cage. And they took her and Hasib all the way to the palace. And all the way to the palace as they walked, Hasib wept and apologized. And at last the Queen of Serpents said, I forgive you. This was not the doing of you, but of fate. And the sons of men are never good. And so let me tell you what is going to happen. And as they traveled through the night with the iron cage suspended from a bar carried by two of the soldiers, the Queen of Serpents instructed Hasib on exactly what he needed to do. When we reach the palace, the vizier is going to tell you that you must kill me. And so you must. Then he is going to prepare 3 pots and take 3 segments of my body and cook those 3 segments separately. Now, what you must wait for is the moment when the vizier is summoned to the king's bedside. And at that moment, you must switch the order of those 3 pots. For the first one contains the healing elixir that will give life. The second contains a magical drink of wisdom. And the third, deadly poison. For Hasib, this was a terrible, terrible choice. But he knew that the best way he could honor his love for the Queen of Serpents was to do as she asked. And when they reached the palace and the vizier handed him the great carving knife, Hasib said a prayer of regret. And then he chopped the Queen of Serpents and put the 3 sections into the 3 pots. And the vizier tended them greedily as they bubbled and boiled and fumed and the water sizzled over the edge. And sure enough, just as the 3 pots had reached a high boil, the vizier was summoned to the king's bedside. And quick as that, Hasib carefully moved the first pot into the 3rd position, the 3rd pot into the 1st position, the 2nd pot he left where he was, and the vizier came back. It's ready. Pour me the first draft. And Hasib poured that first draft, handed it to the vizier, who said, I drink to my own cleverness, and fell down dead. Hasib quickly took the 2nd pot, poured it into a decanter, and felt, as he drank that 2nd draft, a great opening in the top of his mind, a great communion of the languages of every bird and animal and insect and fish. And then he took the last, which was the first of the pots, and poured it off and carried it himself to the king, lifted the sick man's head and fed him that drink. And the king's eyelids fluttered and opened. And he looked at Hasib and said, you have healed me. I have waited years for a healer, and now I have found you. And in that very instant, Hasib was appointed to be the king's advisor and healer in all matters spiritual and physical. And the king said, how have I been so blessed? Where have you come from? And Hasib told him the whole story, including the stories within the stories within the stories. And the king said, wait, your father was a famous sage and scholar? He was on his way to me when the pirates captured him. Truly, this is destiny. And the king sent for Hasib's mother, who arrived bearing that thin wooden box that contained just 5 pages, all the wisdom that his father had been able to save, which he passed on to Hasib, and Hasib passed it to us.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Everybody, woohoo! Wow.
Oh,
I
woo.
followed you from up to down and all around. And A timeless story told with timeless wisdom, but also, like you said, a story for now. I just have to say that when he hugged his mother, my mother is on this Zoom. Hi, Mom. And we got to hug each other just the other day for the first time, and it was, I felt that in the story. And I hope you all are having some experiences like that.
Thank you for making that connection. I just got to hug my parents for the first time also. Yes.
So that was one of many beautiful moments. Thank you so much, Ruth. We have to, can't wait till you come back the next time. All right. Our next storyteller is Bev Schwartz, and she's joining us from Albany, New York. Thanks to Ed Lewis, who will be one of our later storytellers, who introduced her to us and us to her. So Bev, please tell us a story.
Good evening. First of all, what a story. That was so great. And my story has to follow, but I hope the storyteller will like mine. This is a true story and happened in the mid-70s. I went to the Caribbean. I teach third grade at the time. I was teaching third grade. And I said, oh, I've never had a nice vacation. And my friend and I, we flew into one of the Caribbean islands. But we already had problems in New York. We drove down to New York and had to wait 8 hours for the plane. We were supposed to have the day in the islands, and we never got there till 9 o'clock at night. So we lost a whole day, but we weren't going to let that, ruin our vacation. Had a wonderful vacation. Then it was New Year's Day. We had the whole day there, and then we were going to fly back to New York. And all 400 of us passengers that were on this trip was told, we have to go at 7:30 in the morning to the main area, and we're going to be picked up and going to the airport. And the airport in the 70s was just a big hangar, no windows, but one bathroom, no food, no water. And we sat, and we sat, and we sat. What happened? Nobody knew. No one was working there in the airport to tell us why we were just sitting there when we were supposed to leave by 8:30. So about 2 o'clock, a plane comes in. And we're all saying, yay. We were all talked out. Everyone was too busy talking to everyone, but we had even had that. I was tired. I was hungry. I had a headache. I was like, get me back to New York. And the whole crew and the pilot got off the plane, got into a van, and they left. So then someone said, well, the flight couldn't stay here, the flight crew, because they had been up in the air too long. We're waiting for a new crew to come in, but we'll put you on the plane so we can take off as soon as they get there. So we sat in a plane, the engine's not going, no air conditioning, no water, a couple bathrooms this time. Nothing happened. Finally, around 7 that night, a crew came. We all applauded. We thought maybe the whole world had forgotten us. So we took off. And they fed us a little because it was only supposed to be a 3-hour, trips. There was only munchies, but that tasted like ice cream and hot fudge sundaes. We were all so hungry. Now, I was sitting in the front row right before the stewardesses where they make everything. And I heard one stewardess say to the other, these poor people, they don't know it yet, but they're not going to New York tonight. My ears picked up, my teacher ears, because I always knew every voice of my kids. I could say behind my back, I hear you talking, Joshua. And oh, this woman's unbelievable with what she hears. And she said, we're going to Jamaica. There's a plane load of people waiting on the ground to get into this plane and then go into New York. They're sending the wrong plane there. So these people have to wait till tomorrow till they find a plane for them. I said, over my dead body am I going to Jamaica and staying there for another day? I'm going to New York tonight. Now, I stood up. Don't ask me why. And I said in my teacher voice, can I have everyone's attention? To my surprise, you could have heard a pin drop. Everyone got real quiet. I said, I need to share something with you. And I told him the story. And I said, I don't know about any of you, but I won't get off this plane. I won't get off this plane And to my amazement, the whole plane started shouting, "We won't get off this plane. We won't get off this plane." Now, my friend next to me was very upset. "See what you started? You're going to get us arrested. I'll lose my medical license." I said, "Just pretend you don't know me." I was that mad. And everyone around me laughed because they heard what the comment I said. So the co-pilot came down. He's looking at me, and everyone's quiet when they saw the co-pilot. So I sat down, very ladylike, and he was staring at me. I stared right back at him. So then he gets on the, microphone, and he says, "She's right. She's told you the truth. We weren't going to tell you till we got to Jamaica. But we need volunteers to get off the plane because these people have to go to New York also. And we'll get you on tomorrow sometime. You just have to stay in the airport till then." People didn't like what they heard. And he said, "When we get there to Jamaica, we'll ask for volunteers and we'll figure things out then." So we landed in Jamaica. I looked out the window. There was an ambulance. Someone's going to take me away. Ha ha, hee hee, oh, ho, ho, I thought in my head. And there was a fire truck. Why a fire truck? And then there was a lot of police cars with sirens and lights going on. I go, "Oh boy, this is an international incident if I ever saw one." Troy to New York third grade teacher gets arrested in Jamaica. And the police come on. The captain now is with the police, and they look at me. So I stared right back. Didn't say a word. I was scared shitless, excuse my language, but I didn't say a word. Then finally they said, the captain got on the microphone, "We need volunteers to get off like I suggested. Who would like to volunteer?" 5 people from the back of the plane got up and they started walking down the aisles, and everyone's going, "Boo! You're deserting our plane." So everyone was making comments, and off they went. And then the captain said, "Well, if you won't get off and volunteer, we have to clean this plane because federal law says that we have to clean a plane before it takes off again." And they looked at me like, "What are you going to say now?" I said, raised my hand again. And I said, "Get a garbage bag and go up and down the aisles. We'll throw our garbage in. You can say we cleaned the plane." Everyone started to applaud. And then they started shouting, "We won't get off the plane." So that's what they did. They let us stay. And we went on, the plane took off with all but 5 of the passengers to New York. Now you think my story ends there, but it didn't. We have a little surprise for you in this story. Well, my friend wasn't talking to me anymore, so I had nothing to lose. Guess what? I stood up and I said, "Can I have everyone's attention again?" I thought he was going to have a heart attack, my friend. He put his hat over his head and just slouched down. What the hell is she going to do now? I live in Albany, New York area, and that's where the New York State Attorney General's office is. If you give me your name, address, phone number, and stamps or stamp money, I'm going to write a letter to the Attorney General, and I'm going to see if we can get our money back and let them know how horribly we've been treated. We should not have been treated this way, and someone has to teach them Pan Am a lesson. And to my surprise, everyone on the whole plane did sign it and gave it to me at the end of the trip, my papers. Well, I'm going to carry through. So got back to New York, drove back to Albany, wrote my letter, sent it to the Attorney General's office. And a week later, I get a phone call. "This is the Attorney General's office. We'd like to meet with you. Can we make a time and a date? We really are concerned about your letter." So I made an appointment after school so I could still work, got dressed in my professional suit because I was also a principal, and off I went. And I got to the office and they said, "Is anybody coming with you?" I said, "No, just me today." And they said, "Oh," and they're looking at me real strange. So I go into a room and there's a whole bunch of lawyers on one side of a table and a stenographer. And they said, "How many other people are coming from your firm?" I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, what law firm are you representing?" "Oh, no, I teach 3rd grade in Troy." And one of the guys says, "Oh, you have chutzpah." And I go, "Yes, I do." So I knew what that word meant. It means you got nerve. And we sat and I told him the story. And I said, there should be laws about how long you wait in an airplane on a runway or in an airport. And now today we have rules that you can't do things like that. So we worked together, and then about a month later, I get a phone call. Bev, we have some good news. We have worked with Pan Am. They don't want this to go public. And they were really surprised that someone would do something like this that you did. So it would make even a great story. So we got every single penny back from the whole plane, their money back. Couldn't believe it. I had been corresponding to people. People had been calling. People did send me a lot of nice thank you notes too. But the best part of the story is yet to come. A month later, Pan Am filed for bankruptcy and went under. Maybe we were the cherry on the icing that caused it. Thank you.
There is justice after all.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Bev. Yes, power to the people. Wonderful. Our next storyteller is Ida Johnson. And Ida has been I just have to say, we've had quite a few months, Ida, you've been joining us just as a telephone number, and it's so wonderful to see you. And we can't wait to hear your story.
I'd like to share a story that I got from Sarah Armstrong's wonderful Stage Bridge class, along with Jim Brule. And this story is said to come from the Kalahari region of Southern Africa. Or was it? Long, long ago, on the edge of the dry Kalahari, there lived a farmer who had a herd of cattle that he loved more than anything else. And every day he would take them to a place where they had the best grass that could be found in that dry region. And at night he would put them in a corral with a thorn gate to keep them safe. He loved the taste of the sweet milk that came from his cows. And so he was very proud of the care that he had taken of them. One day, he came to milk his cattle, and their udders were all flat and empty. I must find a better field with better grass for them today, he thought. And so he took them to another field. And the next morning, when he tried to milk the cows, again, the udders were flat as if someone had already milked his cows. And so that night he decided he would stay with his cattle and he would find what was happening. He had hidden and was very, very sleepy, and as it got darker and darker and he was just about to fall asleep when he heard the laughter of women coming from the sky. And there, as he looked up towards the moonlight, there came a rope ladder, and down that ladder there came 12 beautiful, beautiful women, each carrying a calabash under their arm. And when they reached the earth, they began milking cattle, and they went about this task through the night. And as the sun was just coming up, they began climbing back up that rope ladder towards the moonlight. And he rushed forward and grabbed the very last woman that was going up the ladder. Stop, stop, stay. And she pulled away. Wait, wait. Stay with me. Stay. Marry me and share my life. And her foot went back onto the ground. I will stay. She said, I will marry you and share your life, but you must promise me. You must promise me that, you see, I have a basket that I carry with me, and in it, I keep things that are most precious to me. And you must promise that you will never look inside this basket without my permission. That seemed like such a small thing to ask. Of course I'll do that. But if you ever open this basket, I must leave. He agreed to this plan, and they were married, and their union seemed a happy one, for everything she touched seemed to be blessed. She loved the cattle as much as he. Great care was taken. And so their days went forward, and she would walk back into the house and she would glance at the basket, and a smile would go across her face. But each day when he came back, he looked at that basket and he just couldn't help himself. What was in that basket? It was so tightly woven that he couldn't see inside. The wooden lid on top was so tightly placed, oops, it couldn't fall off. His curiosity kept eating away at him as he looked at that basket on the shelf each day. And so time passed until one day he came in. He came in from the fields to get something, and he was by himself. And there was the basket. His curiosity got the better of him, and he pried the wooden lid off, and he looked inside and he laughed. Oh. Just then, he heard his wife's footsteps. She walked in with a smile on her face, and as she smiled, she thought of all of the things that were in her basket. She thought of the sparkle of the moonbeams that were there. She thought of the sound of her star sister's laughter tucked away. She could feel the rush of the wind against her cheek, and that was there. And the taste of warm milk after a midnight milking. And the cry of awe and wonder that her husband had cried when he had seen the brand new baby calf. She thought of all these things and so many more that were in that basket. And she looked towards the basket, and she knew what had happened. You opened the basket. You opened the basket, didn't you? Yeah, I opened it. I opened it, but I don't know what all the fuss was about. It was empty. You opened the basket, and when you looked inside, you thought it was empty. It contained all these things that were so precious to me, so precious to us. All these things that were gathered like the things in my soul. You looked inside this basket and you saw nothing. You looked deep inside me and you saw nothing. You made me a promise, and I must follow it. I must go, and not because the basket was opened, but because when you looked deep inside of my soul, deep inside of me, deep inside that basket, you saw nothing at all. And so she gathered up her things, she gathered that basket, and as night fell, she walked out the door, down the road, into the setting African sunset of red and orange. And she was never seen on earth again. Thank you.
Great job. Anna.
Ida.
Great job.
What a story and what a beautiful telling.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And thanks to Sarah, who was one of the first people I heard it from.
So Sarah Armstrong there from, by the way, chair of our Storytelling Association. And later we'll be hearing from Ed Lewis, who is on the board of the Storytelling Association of California. And I don't know if we've had another storyteller who's on the board, but please, board members, make sure people know that you're here. Okay, I will take a little break now. 3-minute bio break. If you don't need to go, then feel free to unmute yourself and chat with each other. And Marnie in 3 minutes is going to mute everybody again, and we'll have Tim Aronetta will be our first storyteller. So don't go away. We have so many wonderful stories to come.
Hey, Marnie, I'm just checking my microphone to make sure you can hear me.
Yes, you sound great, Tim. Very good.
Ruth, so cool that you're here. That was a great story.
Thanks, Sarah. I just fell in love with Scheherazade in the past 5 years, and before that, I never got it. Now I'm mesmerized.
I never heard that story for sure. That's awesome.
Cool. It's number 482 out of the 1001.
I see.
But
Thank you very
it
much.
is so long that it goes up to like 498.
Oh,
The stories within stories go at least 2 or 3 layers deep. It's
wow.
pretty amazing. Yeah.
That's awesome. Is there a particular translation you like?
You know, I was trying to remember. I have the really traditional one with, I think, Arthur Rackham illustrations. And
Nice.
it's not a great translation.
Mm.
And then I read so many versions, I can't remember. There was one that I liked especially, and now I can't figure out which one it is. I think probably there's a children's book version of it, because I find those so beautifully streamlined.
Mm, mm. Well,
But
that's lovely.
there's a fantastic middle grade novel called Shadow Spinner that retells the Scheherazade story, and it is phenomenal. It's really about the art of storytelling. And now I have to be sure that's the name, but I'm going to Google it and tell you guys if that is. But it really set me on fire.
Super. Yeah, please do. And you can put it in the chat, and any place else you'll be telling, let us know.
Oh
yes. I wanted to say, sorry, that if anybody has any events coming up that you want us all to know about, please put them in the chat. And I'm going to put in the chat the website of Stephen Henniger, who was our February featured storyteller. He's been putting stories up on his website to listen to. A new one, I think, every month. And so I just got something from him recently. So I thought some of you might enjoy that. So I'll put that.
Liz,
Yes.
I'll put my email. If you know of anything and I could attend, let me know also. I'd like to kind of expand and practice some of my stories elsewhere. Also.
All right,
I'm loyal to you though first. of
So,
course.
but Bev, go ahead and put your email in the chat.
Okay, and if anybody can tell me of anything, I'd appreciate it because I've just started storytelling about, this is my second year, so I'm brand new. So I don't have a lot of experience. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Bev, Alyssa here. I'm sort of new to this as well. I just wanted to you might like, since you have the time difference, I think it's a 2 p.m. one on Sunday.
Uh-huh.
That's Delta Word. Are you talking about Delta Word Weavers?
Yeah. So you might that time frame and.
Oh no, I know how to take naps very well and stuff. In fact, I said I'm going to lay down for an hour at 3 and I woke up at 7. I was just tired. So, I don't mind, I'm retired. My life is whatever I want to do at whatever time, so there it is. I put my name is Beverly. My friends call me Bev though. Only my mother would call me Beverly when she was mad at me.
Well, I wouldn't have thought you were so new to storytelling either. That was
Well,
nice.
thank you. I take that as a high compliment because, I've been working with Ed on a Saturday morning where they critique you and they try to give you suggestions. And I've really grown in that group with Ed, and I've seen Ed stories kind of even get better and better. So I really enjoy hearing Ed talk a lot.
All right, we'll hear from Ed a little bit, but now it looks like Marnie has spotlighted Tim. So
Okay, Tim and Liz, you're going to have to unmute yourselves.
got it. Okay, Tim, are you unmuted?
I'm unmuted.
All right. Lots more great stories. Kick it off, Tim. Tim Araneta.
A few years ago, I was asked to tell stories in a glass blowing studio. And the owner asked me, did I know any fairy tales about a glass blower? And I didn't, but I told him I'd look. And I found this one, The Glass Dog. There was once a wizard who was a very good wizard. He was renowned for his collection of books from all the renowned wizards throughout history, and he himself had invented quite a few wizardments of his own. Now, he lived on the top floor of a tenement building and mostly kept to himself, busy conjuring spells and making compounds. But every day he'd be interrupted by a knock on the door. If it wasn't the Iceman, it was the laundry woman. If it wasn't the laundry woman, it was the peanut lady. If it wasn't the peanut lady, it was someone selling hair oil or shoe polish or a toothbrush. What I need is a dog. But he didn't know anything about how to get a dog. So he went to the one person he could tolerate, and that was his next door neighbor on the floor of his building, the glassblower. I need a dog to bark and chase people away from my door so I can work uninterrupted. Well, what kind of dog? Like, what else do you need to know about the dog? What kind of dog are you looking for? Doesn't matter. It just has to obey me, has to be neat, not shed. And I'm not good with animals, so it needs to be able to take care of itself because I won't feed it. Well, said the glassblower, that's a tall order. You might have some difficulty finding a dog like that. And the glassblower paused because he was in the middle of making a blue glass flower pot with a pink rose bush on the side with green glass stem and leaves and pink petals. And that gave the wizard an idea. Could you make a dog out of glass? Well, certainly I could do that, but that wouldn't help you because it wouldn't bark at anybody. Well, what kind of wizard would I be if I couldn't enchant a glass dog to bark at people coming to my door? Well, the thing is, you'd have to pay me, and I know you don't have any money. I don't believe in money. But perhaps you'd take and trade one of my magical concoctions. Say something that could cure your rheumatism. Agreed. What color do you want your dog? Well, it was agreed. And the very next morning, the glassblower delivered to the wizard's front door a little pink glass dog with a blue glass ribbon and twinkling black glass eyes that sparkled with the intelligence of the glass eyes of very learned men. And the wizard was quite pleased, and he gave the glassblower a vial as payment. The glassblower looked at it. There's nothing in here. Ah, but there is. There's one drop left of a potion that will cure any disease, including your rheumatism. But don't spill it, because I've forgotten the recipe, so there's no more where that came from. Well, the glassblower took it back to his rooms. But as he was feeling in good spirits and good health that day, he thought he'd save it for a day when his rheumatism was acting up. Meanwhile, the wizard spoke his wizardly words, and then that glass dog began to wag its tail, wink its black eyes, and began to bark. And the wizard was so pleased he placed it right outside his door. And the rest of the day he spent in his books and his potions, and was not bothered a bit because the pickle lady never got anywhere near his door. Well, the very next morning, the glassblower was reading the paper when a sad story caught his eye on the society pages. It seems the most eligible bachelorette, the most beautiful and most rich Miss Midas, had contracted a deadly illness, and the doctor said there was no hope of recovery. Well, the glassblower, although he was dirt poor, although he was rather homely, he was clever. And he thought he could put that vial of a curative potion to good use. So he put on his best suit. He put the vial in his pocket. He blacked up his shoes, and he blacked up the spots in his vest. And he slicked back what was left of his hair, and he made his way to Miss Midas's mansion. And when the butler opened the door, the butler said, "No, I'm sorry, we don't need any hair oil or Bibles today, thank you." No, I'm not here for that." "I'm sorry, we don't need a gravestone. The family has a plot and the monument is already paid for." "You won't need a graveyard if you just let me in. I have a magical cure for your lady." Well, that caught the butler's attention. And so the butler did what every good butler would do. The butler went to the housekeeper, and the housekeeper went to the steward. And the steward went to the chef, and the chef kissed the lady's maid. And the lady's maid came down and said, "What is it you want?" And the glassblower explained, "I have a magic potion that can cure the lady of the house, but I'll only give it to her if she agrees to marry me." Well, the lady's maid went up and talked to Miss Midas, and Miss Midas said, "I'd marry any old fool rather than die, so tell him yes." And the glassblower came in. He gave Miss Midas that one drop, and she sprang out of bed, good as new. "Marie, get me my pink silk dress. I'm going to the reception at the Fritters tonight." "Going to a reception," said the glassblower. But Miss Midas, you agreed to marry me." "Well, of course I agreed to marry you, but we haven't put an announcement in the society pages yet." She looked him up and down. He was a bit shabby. "And besides, we need to have time to have the wedding invitations engraved. So call on me tomorrow and we'll discuss it then." And he was shown out of the house. Now, she was glad to get rid of that shabby fellow because she was looking forward to that reception at the Fritters. And he himself was very pleased with himself. He was about to marry the richest woman in town. And he was feeling so good on his way home, thinking about all the ways he was going to be spending that money. He walked into his shabby tenement apartment. He looked at his glassblowing equipment, and he began to smash it into tiny pieces and throw it out the window. The next day, at Miss Midas's house, as she was eating bonbons in her bed, she said, "How is it that you came across a potion that could cure any disease?" And he told her how he had met the wizard and made him a glass dog, and how the glass dog barked at anyone who would try to come to the wizard's door. "Why, my heavens," said Miss Midas. "All my life, the only thing I have ever wanted is a glass dog that would bark at people at my door. I need one myself." "Well, there's only one like it in the world." "Well, go and buy it for me." The wizard doesn't believe in money, so he won't sell it." "Well, then you must steal it or I won't marry you. There's nothing in the world that can make me happy except having that glass dog." Well, the glassblower decided he did want to please his wife-to-be, so he went home, he got a sack, and it was no difficult business for him to sneak up on that little dog, stuff it in the sack, tie it tight, and the next morning he sent it by messenger boy to Miss Midas's mansion. And once he had had his breakfast, why, he presented himself at Miss Midas's door, but no sooner had the butler opened the door Then the little glass dog started barking and chasing him and nipping at his feet. Well, I'll call off the dog. I'm afraid I can't do that, sir. My lady gave quite explicit instructions to the dog to keep you away from her for the rest of her life. Well, the glassblower couldn't believe it. He left that place. He went down to the drugstore and he put his dime in the telephone box and he called up Miss Midas. What is the meaning of this? Well, frankly, I don't like your looks. Your cheeks are sunken, your hair is too thin, your eyes are too small and red, and your neck is all the wrong proportion. If you were handsome, I might consider marrying you, but you're also just not my type, and there's no more to be discussed. And with that, she hung up the phone. The glassblower was devastated. He sadly returned to his room and he looked for some comfort, but he couldn't work on his glass projects anymore. And then he spied a piece of rope and decided that that might be his only answer. And as he began tying a noose, there was a knock on his door. He opened it. It was the wizard. Someone has stolen my dog and I don't know what to do. You must make me another glass dog. I can't. I've smashed all my equipment. Well, then, how am I going to find my dog? Well, you could offer a reward. I don't have any money. All I have left is a few magical potions. Well, what kind of magical potions? Well, I've got beauty powder. There's one taste and you'd instantly transform into the most handsome creature in the world. The most handsome creature, you say, said the glassblower. If I can find your dog, you'd give me that powder? Why, of course. The glassblower crept out of the tenement building. He didn't go anywhere. He just wanted to put on a good show. He waited an appropriate amount of time, came back upstairs and said to the wizard, I found your dog. It's in residence at Miss Midas's house. Well, the wizard went to Miss Midas's house, knocked on the door, and when the butler opened it, the little glass dog began barking at the wizard. But the wizard spoke his wizardly words, and the dog fell fast asleep. And the wizard picked him up and took him back to the top floor of that tenement building. He gave the powder to the glassblower, who eagerly took it, and with one dose was transformed into the most handsome creature in the world. When he called on Miss Midas, why, she fell in love immediately with his good looks. Now, the wizard had warned him that beauty was only skin deep, but the glassblower's attitude was, hey, if I ever lose my skin, I won't care about beauty. He agreed to marry Miss Midas, and the wedding engraving, the notice was put in the society pages, the invitations were engraved and sent out, and the next week they were married. And I wish I could tell you they lived happily ever after. But she was quite jealous of how handsome her husband was. And so she began to treat him like a dog. And he got so resentful, he went beyond spending his $4 a week allowance and ran her up into debt until she was miserable. And as for the glass dog, it's still outside the wizard's door. And the reason I know is that I've been dying to find out the moral of this story from the wizard, but I can't get anywhere near him. Thank you. That's an American fairy tale called The Glass Dog, originally written by L. Frank Baum.
Wow. Wow, Tim, how cool. Is that in what book did you find it in? I mean, we know he's the author of the Wizard of Oz books, but
That's what you find when you Google fairy tale and glassblower.
Wow. Fascinating. How wonderful. Thank you so much. Absolutely delightful. All right. I have to scroll and make sure. Okay. So yes, thank you. Marnie has spotlighted our next storyteller. Is a very special guest. His name is Dan Holtzman, and you might have an inkling that he's related to our fearless hostess, Sally. And indeed, this is Sally's son, Dan. Thanks so much for coming, Dan. Tell us a story.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And thanks to my mother for the nepotism, allowing me to tell my story tonight. So thank you, Sally. This is the true story of my time in show business. I was a professional juggler for almost 40 years. And I got to work with many celebrities, Robin Williams, and Billy Crystal, Roseanne Barr, among others, Howie Mandel. This is a story about a magician, an unknown magician who I'll call the drunken magician. It started back in Los Angeles in the early 80s. I was in my early 30s, and the temperature was in the low 70s. Okay, I made that part up. I don't remember the temperature, but I remember the agent who got me the job. Her name was Jeannie Janae. Back in those days, there were many agents who used alliterative names like Debbie Dean or Candy Casino. This one was Jeannie Janae. And she booked cruise ships that left from San Diego and sailed to Ensenada, Mexico for one night of adventure on the Mexican Riviera known as Ensenada. So I had this job between my job as a team juggler with the Raspini brothers, because my partner had moved up to San Francisco. I was still in Los Angeles. So I would drive down on Fridays and do Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night on this cruise ship, and then drive back to Los Angeles. Now, over the course of a few months, the job kept getting shorter and shorter. And by the end, it was just Saturday nights. Just one night, I would drive down in the morning, get on the ship, sail to Ensenada, and then drive back that night. So I had done it maybe a dozen times, and I enjoyed it. It didn't pay very much, but it gave me a chance to work on my act and perform my solo routine. And then one day, the agent called me and said, would I pick up a magician, and bring the magician to the ship? And I thought, well, that'd be fun. I can enjoy the company, and I usually listen to books on cassette, but I would enjoy chatting with a fellow performer on the way to San Diego, and then I would drive him back that night after he did his performance. So I picked him up, it was a bit out of my way, and we started to chat, and we did the usual schmooze showbiz thing. Who do you know? Where have you worked? Stuff like that. He'd worked the Magic Castle, which is always a sign of a classy magician to have worked the Magic Castle. And he worked with some friends of mine, so I knew he was legit and he had some chops, and I was looking forward to working with him and seeing his show. So we drive down to San Diego. It's about a 2 hour and 15-minute drive, and we're getting along fine. And we get on the ship and we walk up the gangway, and the first thing he notices is, oh, look, they have Bloody Marys and screwdrivers. The passengers who got on in the morning would usually have a drink, and they offered free drinks to the passengers. And even though he was a performer, he thought he would help himself to a drink. I thought, all right, that's a kind of a nice way to start the day, with a screwdriver. I left him to go check into my room. He checked into his room. I didn't see him again until lunchtime. So I see him at lunch. He's with a group of the crew, and one of the crew members is having a birthday, so there's a bit of a party. And at this party, there's quite a bit of alcohol. And this magician is having another drink, and he's feeling no pain. And in fact, one of the tricks he decides to do is have someone select a card, then he'd find that card in a very mysterious fashion. So someone picks the card, and he pretends to look for it. Then he reaches down his pants and brings it out from his butt, the selected card. And he's the big hit of the party, and they're having a great time, and they're laughing, and he's having drinks. And I'm thinking, this guy's getting a little bit lit early in the day. Of course, he still has time to get sober, not sober enough to do the show at least. So I leave him and say, I'm gonna go practice, and I'll see him in a couple of hours. Maybe he can meet me at the showroom and we can talk about that night's show. So I go to practice. I leave him there at the luncheon, enjoying himself, doing more magic for the crew. I go to practice my juggling act. I usually practice about an hour, hour and a half. I come out, and the magician is passed out on the deck. Out of all the people, 300 or 400 people on this ship who could have found him, I'm the one who found him passed out on the deck. So there he is. He is completely passed out. He is blotto. And I think, okay, a guy on the deck passed out is a drunk. But a guy sleeping in a lounge chair, he's just a guy enjoying himself, having a little nap on the ship. So I get him up. I say, hey, why don't you sleep in this lounge chair? And then I'll come and get you in about an hour or two. Hopefully you can still sober up. You can get some coffee in you. Maybe you can still pull off this job and not ruin the entire thing. This was his first engagement for this agent, and this was his chance to make a good impression. So I thought, okay, maybe he still could do this. Why don't you nap on the lawn chair? I'll come back in a couple hours, wake you up, and we'll see what happens from there. So I go back to my room, and then I'm walking around the ship a couple hours later, and I'm going to go about to find this magician who's passed on the deck chair. When the cruise director comes up to me and tells me, your friend is in so much trouble. So first I have to go, okay, first off, not my friend, just a magician who I met today, who I drove to the ship as a favor to the agent. Do not know him, not involved with him. What has he done? So it turns out that he got up from the deck chair, went down to the crew agency, the crew deck where the crew stayed, and tried to break into the staff captain's room. And the staff captain was a very macho Greek guy, and the magician proclaimed his love for the captain in a very, very straightforward way, saying, I want to have sex with you, but in a very graphic term. So he was knocking on his door, screaming, I want to have sex with you. And of course, it didn't go over very good with the Greek crew captain, and they called the police. And so the crew director told me, he said, if you want to see your friend, the magician, I go, okay, first off, not my friend. If you want to see the magician being hauled off the ship and being pushed into the back of a Mexican police car, now would be the time. So we walk over to the other side of the ship, and sure enough, here's the magician. Now his hands are handcuffed behind his back, and he's crying and screaming and carrying on. No, no. And he's being pushed into the back of the police car and driven away to Mexico to be put into jail. So this magician went from a colleague, someone looking to do a good job to impress an agent, to being a drunken mess, now hauled away by the Mexican police. So after that, I had to do an extra 25, 30 minutes of the show that night, and I had to drive home by myself. I had no books on tape, and only the memories of this drunken magician and the story to tell my friends about this disintegration of a showbiz person from a colleague to a mess in one day. Then the other day, next day, I called the agent and found out what happened. It turned out this magician had just been married. He was first time away from his wife. He was an alcoholic and bisexual. And once he had that first drink, it was all over, all downhill from there. So that's my story of the drunken magician. He was put into the back of the Mexican police car, did his greatest trick, and he vanished from my life forever. I hope you enjoyed this story, a true story from my career in show business. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan. I think you have another career from juggler to storyteller and back and forth. Wonderful. Thank you. It's great. All right. Our next storyteller is Ed Lewis. And there you are, Ed. And Ed is the host of his own story swap, of A Story Swap. Maybe before you tell your story, just let everybody know what that is and when. You have to unmute yourself. And also the host and MC of the SAC Genre Stories monthly event.
Right. So that event happens once a month. It's the third Wednesday of every month. It was last night. And last night we had 7 tellers from different story swap groups throughout California. And next month we have on May 19th, Legends, Urban, and Traditional. So you can be nominated as a storyteller by your swap group. Andre represented the Contra Costa tail spinners last night with a fantastic story as usual by Andre. Okay, I'm going to tell you a cautionary tale. And I invite you to listen very carefully to the moral of this story, because it just may save your body and soul. There was once a colony of ants that was harvesting grain in the town of Winters, California, which is about 20 miles from where I live in Davis. Winters is a beautiful, small community. And it does have a reputation with us Davis folks for stealing our famous Palms Playhouse, but that's a rant for another story. The ants would wake up every morning at 8 a.m. and they'd go out into the fields and harvest grain all day long. in the 110-degree summer heat. They'd come back about 6 p.m., eat a small bit of grain, store the rest for the winter, and then they'd go to bed early. The grasshopper, on the other hand, would wake up about 11 o'clock in the morning. He'd check his Facebook posts. He'd play a few video games, and then he'd have a fly salad sandwich for lunch and his favorite drink, fresh squeezed moth juice, which of course is 100% organic. Then he would go out and kick back on his hammock and rub his legs together and play that beautiful, beautiful grasshopper music. This is how the summer went. The ants toiling, the grasshopper relaxing and playing his music. Well, the winter did come. It was the winter with 20-degree below zero weather. The ants had closed their door, holed up for the winter, got a nice toasty fire going, and lived off the grain that they had stored. The grasshopper went into a small grass hut, and he really couldn't get a fire going before long. He was cold, and he hadn't stored enough food, and he was starving. The ants heard a knocking at the door. They opened it, and there was the grasshopper. Please, please share some of your grain with a poor, hungry, and lonely grasshopper. And the elder ant looked down at the grasshopper with disgust and said, "We toiled all summer saving for this winter that we knew was coming and you knew was coming also. All you did was play your music. Eat your music." And with that, slam the door. Moral: if you don't plan for your future, you just may not have a future to plan for. Now, I've thought a little bit more about that, and that ending doesn't quite resonate with me. So let me switch that up just a little bit. Let's see. Oh yeah, so the grasshopper came and asked for food, and the elder opened the door and looked down at this grasshopper with disgust and said, "We toiled all summer long while you played your music, did nothing. Eat your music." And with that, he was getting ready to slam the door when he heard a voice. The littlest ant looked up and said, Father, I think we should invite this ant in for the winter, this grasshopper in for the winter. I, for one, loved the beautiful music that he played all summer long. It made my toil much more bearable. Please, let's invite him in." And the ants got together with their antennae like ants do and conversed. And before long, they saw the wisdom in that little ant. So they invited the grasshopper in for the winter. And the grasshopper played his beautiful music and shared amazing stories. And the moral of that story is a life of all toil is a life without joy. Oh, wait. Oh, hold on. I just thought of something. I've got a little better ending. Hang on one second. So, the grasshopper said, "Please let me come in." And he's inside now, playing his music and all that. We had a great winter. The stories were unbelievable. If you ever heard a grasshopper tell stories to you out while you're camping and listen to the beautiful music, it is just enchanting. Well, they heard a knock on the door right towards the end of winter. And they opened the door, and there was the most beautiful butterfly. She looked down at the grasshopper and she purred, "Well, sugar, are you ready for our annual migration?" And the grasshopper looked up at her and said, "Yes, ma'am, I'm ready." And he turned and thanked the ants for their hospitality. He got on board that butterfly, and they flew off to the Bahamas, where all spring they drank pina coladas, sucked those sweet grasses, and joined the local reggae band. Moral: Moral. Oh, lost my moral here. Sorry about that. While it is important to feed our bellies, it is more important to feed our souls. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ed. 3 morals in one. Awesome.
I remembered the last one.
Sally, it's time. I'm turning things over to you as we're coming to the end of our evening. Sally, you need to unmute yourself.
I'm going on about how much I enjoy. Wait a minute, there's something else here. Mute myself. Yes. All right. There we go. Sorry. So enjoy the evening. Thank you so much, tellers. Wonderful, wonderful evening. Yay, 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 yay. And isn't it fun to have my own son on? What fun. Must be something about hereditary, don't you think? Yes. So I'm going to take you out with a little story, has a moral, and I hope you agree with me. So there was this little old woman, prototype standing right before you. This little old woman who went for a walk in the woods, and she stopped by a pond. And as she was musing about the scene, she heard a voice say, "Pick me up." She looked around, didn't see anybody. And again she heard, "Pick me up." And then she spied on a leaf a little green frog. She looked down at him. She said, "Are you a talking frog?" "Yes, I am." "Pick me up, give me a kiss, and I will turn into a handsome senior citizen and become your lover. All of your girlfriends will be jealous of you." And she looked down at the frog. She stared at him for quite a while. And then she bent down, picked him up, and put him in her pocket. Hey, didn't you hear what I said? I said, kiss me and I become a handsome senior citizen and I will become your lover. And she looked down into her pocket for a long time. I think I prefer a talking frog. The moral of that story is, with age comes wisdom. Have a wonderful evening. Enjoy yourselves. Keep your stories going. Come back to see us next month. We'd love to see you. Good night.
Oh, great.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.